Clarita here, and I've got a new sponsor, DistroKid. If you want to release your music into the world, DistroKid's the easiest way to get your music into all the major streaming platforms, unlimited uploads, and keep 100% of your royalties. And because you're a Design Freaks listener, you get 30% off. Go to distrokid.com/VIP/designfreaks. DistroKid. Okay, Scott, will you test?
Testing number 2. Seems like it's doing its thing.
Oh, it's on both of us. Okay. Hi, Scott.
Hey, how you doing?
Welcome back to Design Freaks Podcast. So today we have Scott Lindberg here, who is a local graphic designer. Actually, you live in Edmonds?
Yeah.
So an Edmonds graphic designer and a curator of album cover artwork. So I wanted to bring him in and have him talk about his most recent show over at Civilization in Pioneer Square and maybe some future projects.
Yeah, so we just are closing a show at Non-Breaking Space, the Civilization Gallery. And we were looking at abstract record covers, so non-representational, more formal kinds of designs, from the 50s and 60s, mostly mid-century. So we decided on 20 designers who we're going to focus on, chose 100 records from those 20 people, and assembled a show out of it. And it's all kind of revolving around this abstract, non-representational, having the form of the record cover represent the sound on the record rather than the artist, or just showing a photo of someone on the sleeve.
And what era are they mostly from?
The show covers, I think, 1950 to 1976, more or less. So we're looking at those mid-century designers that big names like Saul Bass, and then small names that people have kind of forgotten, that designers that have been lost to time, people like Barbara Brown or Jerry Olin.
The show was so cool. You just had your closing party, and it was up for a while.
Yeah,
right?
I think we were up for 2.5 or 3 months.
Right. Where can people find that imagery? If you don't live in Seattle or you want to see this collection, where can they find it?
So there's a catalog for the show on the Non-Breaking Space website. I believe that's non-breaking.space.
I'll put a link up.
And just look for the shape of sound, and we have a catalog with all 100 pictures, or all 100 album sleeves, and bios for each of the people that we were talking about, and a little intro. And so there's quite a bit of information, all downloadable as a PDF.
The catalog is so cool, and I learned a lot going to the show. Like you said, there's some big names like Saul Bass, but I think we want to talk about today one of the lesser known people.
Yeah, I think that I'd qualify him as kind of someone who time forgot for a while and now is starting to be recognized again, I hope.
Yeah. Name a few of the people from the show. We'll get into Ronald Clyne, but what are some other people? There were some women too, right?
Yeah, both Barbara Brown and Jerry Olin are women. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about them, and I've done tons and tons of digging, and they've just been kind of lost to time. So hopefully someone will be able to figure out sometime who they were, but their work is pretty amazing.
It's pretty crazy how women of that era, even up till the 90s, didn't get credit, or
It's surprising that they were given credit at all.
that their
honestly.
names were attached.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because, more often than not, designers were not given credit at all, male or female.
Right.
It's very uncommon for women to be given the credit when they've done the work. So
It's usually just the in-house record label designer or some studio.
or the art director.
Right. That's true. So what is different about Ronald Clyne?
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with Ronald Clyne.
Ooh.
And I don't really know if I can put a finger on why. I guess I came to know of his work maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and he did this series of records for Columbia that are very heavily reliant on dividing graphic space, dividing space in a geometric way, and then using pattern instead of photography to give texture and depth and all of that. So he's using like marbled papers and hand-drawn whatever blots and whatever, and then dividing that up into some sort of composition to anchor like a masthead of typography. And he was approaching that all very different than a lot of the people at the time too, because he was anchoring these little blocks of type kind of in random places on the sleeve, where a lot of people were just putting a banner across the top to make it easy to flip through in the bins. Well, that's mostly his work for Columbia. The funny thing is there's a lot of overlap. He worked with maybe 6 or 8 different record publishers. He's best known for his work at Folkways, where he's art director for 20-something years. He was art director from like 1946 to 1986 or something like that. So it was like 40 years he was there. And that work is a little more photographically oriented, where he was a big collector of indigenous Pacific art. So he would often take a photo of a mask or something from his collection for, these collections of these the records were basically showcasing different folk types of music. So he did a lot of covers for, indigenous music, and he used then indigenous objects on the cover. Do these very simple uncoated paper, which is super nice, and printing a one-color photograph, overprinting it on a colored paper, and using a second color for typo. You get this really rich image with a kind of economy of, it's not like Folkways was raking in the bucks. It's not like they were, doing big pop artists. It's, frog sounds from the Pacific Northwest.
I really want to find the Frog Sounds album and put it on the Instagram.
I wish that I had it. That's one that I like.
So I'll have to reference these and get them up on the Instagram so people can see what you're talking about. But so his time at Columbia, he sort of was experimenting.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I get. There's no real documentation of what he was trying to accomplish. He didn't really talk about any of the smaller jobs. For Columbia, he did maybe 250 records, whereas Folkways series is over 500.
But he was directing.
He was he was he was the art director for Folkways, but he was the only person doing the art. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
okay.
He had very hands-on.
I should say so. But okay, so another weird thing about him is his origin story, right?
Yeah, so he started out as a teenager being super interested in horror and fantasy.
As we are.
And so his first published work was, I think it was published when he was 18, and it was for a science fiction fanzine. Not even there's lots of really obscure little stapled fanzines that he was doing interior artwork for. And I have a few examples of those in my archive, but
maybe we could post
so I could
one.
try to share some of them.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So yeah, he was doing lots of that, really underground, photocopied and stapled thing in the mid 40s or early 40s, which is crazy. I think of fanzines as mid 90s or early 90s, but this is the beginning. It was the grandfather, yeah.
Wow.
But so he went from doing those and started working with Arkham House, a publisher in Wisconsin who published all of H.P. Lovecraft's stories.
Whoa.
And then he did, all sorts of random. I think he did 30 or 40 different Arkham House covers over the course of that, between the 1946 maybe and the early 60s or something.
So this is, I'm looking at his Wikipedia. It's calling out the Arkham Sampler.
Right.
Which has really nice typography. What else stands out about his early work?
That stuff was mostly illustrative. He was more drawing based than conceptual or more formal design. So he was making monster drawings and doing all sorts of creepy graveyard scenes.
So it wasn't just his type; it was he was drawing all that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So I have a couple pieces of this early original illustration art. So it's like submarines or robed, cloaked figures walking through the forest, or all sorts of. It's kind of all over the place.
Imagine how hard it was to be a goth back then.
Yeah, I think it was super underground, the whole horror scene.
Yeah.
Like people just, it wasn't something that was in the middle America household, more or less.
No hot topics.
It was, probably kids buying it or trading it. Kind of.
Yeah. So then he meets Moses Ashe, right? Or I guess that was way after. This was not till 1948.
Yeah, well, he started at Arkham, a few years before he met Mo. And so I think that he started, what did you say, 1948?
Yeah, 48.
Yeah. So, they struck up a friendship, and Mo just kind of gave him free rein to do whatever he wanted.
Oh, wow.
A record cover should be seen at a glance. You shouldn't have to study different sections of it. You should see the total instantly.
Yeah, that was from a Smithsonian interview that he did, I think in the 80s, talking mostly about his work for Folkways, but the concept follows through in all of his work. I think that he was trying to create an entire thing rather than kind of trying to show you little passages of stuff. He was trying to make it a cohesive whole. I think he was really successful in doing that. Progression of his imagery, starting with the abstract record covers, were late 40s, early 50s, and then going through to some of the later Folkways stuff, the 1970s stuff, when he was doing really formal. There are a couple that are just geometric, like no photography or anything like that, just geometric constructions. And I think that those are really interesting, and those are the kind of things that we included in the show. Whereas the bulk of the work from that series was, photographic. And
photo-based, okay.
Ronald Clyne is one of those things that if I don't have one and I come across one, that I can't leave it behind.
Oh my God. Okay, so how many records or record covers do you own?
It's hard to say. I think that I'm maybe around 3,000 or 4,000 right now.
Okay, that's not. I mean, that's a lot, but
I downsized significantly when we moved to Seattle, so that went from probably 30,000 down to 5.
Okay, so where were you keeping 30,000 records?
In my garage. It's terrible.
And these records you displayed at this was at the non-breaking space. There's like zero ring wear. They look really pristine. Can you give advice to anyone listening? How do you store your records?
It's funny because I go into that, look at the show, and all I see are the pieces with wear. I never store the record in the sleeve. The record always goes in a paper sleeve.
So that's not just for shipping?
No, that's not just for shipping. That's for storage if you want to preserve the seams and not have, it's super easy to split the front cover off the back cover on those things. So one wrong move or you bump your crate the wrong way and things go shipping and stuff gets torn up. So I always keep the record in a paper sleeve behind the actual record, and then the whole thing in an archival
plastic sleeve.
Yeah, it's a.
Do you have a brand that you like?
I don't remember if it's PVC or Mylar, the one that's archival. But no, I buy them in bulk, and then I don't worry about it for years. So
okay,
I buy like 1,000 at a time, and then I don't have to deal with it.
What do you do when you have a record sleeve that's in good shape, but the glue, the adhesive, is sort of just disintegrated? Do you re-glue it?
No, I leave it alone.
Okay.
I'm kind of a purist. I don't mind in my collection if something has wear. It's just a matter of, this thing has been around for a couple of decades, so that's fine. But I try not to add to it.
Yeah.
Try to keep handling down to a minimum. And
what about all the humidity in Seattle? It's so moldy here.
That's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
The keeping them sealed in a sleeve that actually has like a resealable glue strip helps a lot because it doesn't let as much of the humidity in.
Yeah.
But that's a kind of a constant battle.
Do you use dehumidifiers where you store your...
I should, but I
don't. I just put one in I live in a new apartment, and it was so gross in there. The air quality was bad, so I put a dehumidifier in there, plus I have records there. So, there's over an inch of water in that thing every day.
Yeah. So
it's gross.
I keep the bulk of my things, like I said, in the garage.
Right.
Stored in sleeves and in bins. And, it's kind of as good as it can be for the space that I have. I don't have access to climate controlled storage. So, but the things that are important to me are stored in the house and, in record cases. So
cool. And so you moved to Seattle, you had to downsize. Where did that collection go?
It kind of went all over the place. I sold off some of it. I used to run an online shop. So I sold some of them, and a big chunk of it got donated to the Herb Llewellyn Center. They have a big graphic design archive.
What's that? Will you explain what that is?
It's a center at the Cooper Hewitt that's... was founded kind of in honor of Herb Llewellyn, the typographer and designer.
Okay.
And they keep archives of various design pieces. And I've done some work.
That's great.
It's funny, though, the reason I got into Ronald Clyne is I was doing some research on a New York-based design studio called Monogram Art Studios. And in around 1950, they were contracted by Columbia to redesign their entire classical selection, which was thousands of record covers.
Whoa!
And so it was too much for them to handle in-house, and so they started hiring freelance designers. So they hired like Rudolph de Herrock, who was a big name, who would be a big name a few years later. And they also hired Ronald Clyne. So I kind of came to Ronald Clyne through. I think he did maybe 6 or 8 record covers for Monogram for Columbia, and after Monograms, after their contract ran out, he started doing freelance design on his own for Columbia.
Okay.
And that's kind of the bulk of his Columbia work that kind of got me interested in his.
Was the classical stuff first? Oh, wow. Cool.
So, but then, he did work for Vanguard and Epic and half a dozen different labels, kind of in smaller quantities. But for each of these companies, he would design a very distinct look, although it was still very Ronald Clyne. So, elements would spill over early on. Some of the typographic elements from his book covers would spill over. So you'd do this really pointy calligraphy for some of the horror covers, and some of that spills over into classical record covers. And he would do these little patterned areas on the book covers, and that spilled over as well. And so some of these things kind of carry through to the different series, but for like Vanguard, he was doing very strict blocks of type and blocks of photo, and it's kind of the same thing that he was doing for Folkways, and then for Columbia he was doing this more abstract, almost more, I don't want to say more artistic, but it's
expressionist, maybe?
Yeah, it was a little more expressive.
Yeah. What about, so that's such a cool thing to be able to do as a designer, to move from place to place, agency to agency or whatever, and be able to put yourself in all your work. It's difficult. What about you and your work? Are you influenced by Ronald Clyne and the other album designers?
I don't like to say that I'm influenced by them, although
inspired.
I am. I guess I am influenced by them, but I try not to take direct.
Right.
I try not to take what they were doing and apply it.
That's a problematic word.
Right. So the Ronald Clyne doing these, his marbled paper that he would have photographed and use in little chunks in some of his. I've stolen that for a couple projects, and photos with my iPhone, and I do a lot of work for a park district in Minnesota.
Cool.
And so I'd go out and take pictures of the grass and pictures of rocks and leaves, and use those as kind of textural elements for their identity.
It's the spirit of that.
Right. You try not to have it be a pastiche of 1952 just because it doesn't say the same thing now as it did then. Although a lot of the stuff from the 50s and 60s that Clyne did, or the stuff that's shown in The Shape of Sound, it's pretty timeless. It's hard to look at some of it and say, oh yeah, that Joseph Albers covers was made in 1959, where it could be something very contemporary.
Oh yeah.
A couple series, there was Percussion records. So
yes.
So
okay.
Persuasive, Percussion, and what was the other one? Gosh, I can't remember. That's terrible. I should know.
Well,
but so I think 6 of them were from these Percussion series, and then a 7th was a classical record that he did with the very Joseph Albers drawing on the front.
Cool.
But the Percussion ones are all just dots and squares arranged in different assemblies.
I love it. I love the shapes. Maybe I'm just a simple idiot.
Well, I think that these people are saying a lot with a really limited visual vocabulary. Very limiting their visual vocabulary. Not that they didn't have, not that they had a limited vocabulary.
No,
they were able to distill it down to a point where they were saying so much with so little, and I think that that's the interesting thing. Surprising that any of them were given the okay to go ahead with it, even just because it was such a unknown quantity. Their goal is to try to sell records, and when everyone else has a photo of the conductor or of the orchestra on the front of the record, this guy comes up and says, okay, I'm going to do it, and it's going to be a series of dots, and they're all going to be black dots and a line of black type. Record covers from kind of their inception were artwork. That was when Alex Steinweiss did that first graphic record cover, he was coming at it from kind of an art historical perspective, referencing surrealist imagery and whatever.
Okay.
But so I think that there's always been kind of these figures in the design world that have taken a more artistic stance on it. But I think that the whole dots and dashes, very minimal abstract sleeves, I think that was a turning point almost in album design, where, you know, like I keep coming back to Joseph Albers. He was was by far not the first person to do a record cover that was just dots. But he was by far the most influential. And after that came out, so many copycats, you know, all these budget labels started, you know, trying to cash in on, oh, we can put dots on our records too.
Right. I still see it, like, I still see throwbacks of that, which I don't even know if they're aware of the exact history, but I see new designs kind of throwing back to that look.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, the record industry, or the design industry serving the record industry,
right,
does like to reference back a lot.
Yeah.
There's a Ronald Clyne record, I can't remember what it is. It's like Animal Sounds, I think, but it has a tiger on the front, and that tiger is used, like that exact tiger was taken and used on a contemporary pop record. I can't remember which one it was, but, you know.
You hope they know the history and they appreciate it.
I can't imagine where they would have gotten the imagery other than, it's not like it's stock art or something.
Yeah.
I think that they just, you know, scanned it and ripped it off right from the Folkways cover.
Well, okay, well, I think we're kind of running out of time a little bit. But thank you, Scott, for coming in and coming onto the show for the comeback episode after quite a while of being away. And what an amazing show you just curated. Again, it was The Shape of Sound, right?
Right.
That was the name of the show. It was at the Non-Breaking Space at Civilization's studio. And that catalog from the show, I will put a link up in the show notes and probably elsewhere to find, or on my website, to get to that PDF download if you want to learn more about these or about all the designers in the shows. There's more we didn't even mention. But yeah.
It's a fun little mid-century graphic design nerd out possibility.
Yeah, and keep an eye out for it possibly popping up somewhere else.
Yeah, we're hoping to travel the show, so we'll see what happens with it.
Cross all your fingers. Yeah, I hope so too. Just where would you want it to go? Where's the dream spot?
Well, being over here on this coast, like I feel like it needs to hit the Midwest and it needs to hit like New York.
Yeah.
But we'll see if that happens.
And will it remain The Shape of Sound? Is that?
You know, I think so.
Okay.
It might not be the same 100 covers, and it might be, you know, depending on space, more or fewer, probably revolving around this core body of work, but, you know, evolving is needed for whatever the space is. My Instagram is at DCMNTS, and I almost exclusively post record covers with a few book covers thrown in.
Really cool Instagram. Really very well curated, of course. Thanks, everybody. Bye.